Bienvenidos, bienvenido a todos. Welcome everyone. We will start in a few seconds, waiting for the people to connect. Vamos a esperar dejar tiempo que la gente se conecte y arrancamos. Bien. Entonces, como decía, bienvenido a todos a este webinar. Welcome to this Apple webinar. First thing, I want to say that we have simultaneous interpretation. So if you go at the bottom of your screen of your Zoom interface, you will see a world icon. And if you need a translation from Spanish to English, you have to choose the English room. And if you need translation from English to Spanish, you go to the Spanish room. Because our speakers will speak English, ¿ok? Entonces, primero lo que quiero decir es que tenemos traducción simultánea de español, inglés, inglés, español. Tienen que ir a la parte de abajo de la interfaz de Zoom. Tienen un icono en forma de mundo y ahí si necesitan traducción de inglés a español, bueno, tienen que seleccionar la sala de español porque los tres disertantes van a hacer su presentación en inglés. Eso es la primera cosa. Segunda cosa es sobre, yo voy a seguir hablando en español. I will go on in Spanish. La segunda cosa es que primero vamos a tener dos presentaciones, una de API y la otra de IOGP, y luego tendremos una sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Sus preguntas y respuestas pueden usar el icono Q&A, que está también abajo de la interfaz de Zoom, y ahí pueden escribir su pregunta. Y yo la leeré al disertante. Pueden hacer sus preguntas tanto en inglés como en español. No hay ningún problema porque tenemos la traducción simultánea. Entonces, después de esos avisos logísticos, vamos a empezar con el corazón del webinar. Entonces, este webinar se llama Mejorar el desempeño en seguridad de procesos a través del reporting y del benchmarking. Es un webinar que estamos coorganizando con dos asociaciones de la industria con quien Sarpel está, bueno, trabajando mucho. Tenemos como varias reuniones mensuales con estas dos organizaciones. La primera es API, el American Petroleum Institute, que bueno, supongo que muchos de ustedes o todos conocen a API porque es una organización que hace referencia en la industria por sus estándares y bueno, todas las normas. La segunda organización, que es IOGP, International Oil and Gas Producers, es una asociación internacional que, bueno, que tiene tanto a operadores como a proveedores de servicio, pero enfocada en la parte de exploración y producción, en toda la parte de upstream de la industria. Bueno, muy brevemente, vamos a hablar de dos estándares que se complementan y también que usamos como referencia para el manual de usuario del estudio de benchmarking de ARPEL, porque ARPEL también hacemos un estudio de benchmarking anual en seguridad de procesos. De hecho, la campaña 2024 empezó la semana pasada queremos aprovechar este webinar también para fomentar la participación de todas las empresas socias. Pensamos que es algo muy importante que todas las empresas socias se sumen a este proceso. Y bueno, que nos pareció que lo mejor era poner directamente a nuestras empresas socias en contacto con gente que estuvieron en la redacción pensando estos estándares y así tener la oportunidad de, bueno, aclarar dudas, hacer sus preguntas y como ya lo hablé con ellos anteriormente, obviamente están a disposición luego de la actividad, no es que es su única oportunidad para aclarar sus dudas. Bueno, el estándar API 754, bueno, API publicó la tercera edición en 2021. Entonces el título es Process Safety Performance Indicators for the Refining and Petrochemical Industries. Y el reporte 456 de IOGP, también tercera edición, fue publicado en 2023 y el título es Recommended Practice on Key Performance Indicators. Y entonces, como dijimos, este reporte está enfocado en el upstream. Entonces, el objetivo de este webinar es compartir conocimiento sobre las últimas versiones de estos dos documentos y entender cómo los informes y los estudios de benchmarking pueden respaldar la mejora del desempeño en seguridad de procesos en la industria. Perdón. Y como dije, luego tendremos una sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Entonces, tenemos el gusto de tener 3 disertantes con nosotros. La primera es Lex Rosello. Ella es gerente de programa en el Departamento de Estadísticas de API. Y Lex fue miembro del comité responsable de publicar la tercera edición de la API 754. Nuestro segundo disertante que en realidad va a hablar primero es Rodney Raybould, que es gerente de seguridad de procesos de refinación en Marathon Petroleum. Y Rodney presidió el comité bueno, para la revisión de la tercera edición de la API IRP 754 y sigue siendo el presidente del comité. La tercera disertante, que, bueno, pedimos disculpas, pero tiene un problemita con su cámara, así que no va a aparecer en cámara, se lo pierden. Se llama Margarita Malaspina, es líder de seguridad de procesos para el proyecto de desarrollo Trion en Woodside Energy. Y Margarita es una colaboradora activa en la comunidad de seguridad de procesos de la industria del oil and gas y representa a su compañía en el subcomité de seguridad de procesos de IOGP. Bueno, como backup tenemos, si Margarita sigue con problemas técnicos, a Felipe Carvalho, que entonces no tengo claro tu puesto, pero gerente de seguridad de procesos en Petrobras. ¿Es así, Felipe? Y también parte del comité de seguridad de procesos de IOGP.
Yeah, process safety coordinator here in Petrobras and work as a representative in the process safety subcommittee at IOGP. Thanks.
Okay, so it was not that bad. Not bad what I said. Okay, perdón, sigo en español. Bueno, vamos a empezar con la actividad. Entonces, Rodney, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending. My name is Rodney Raybould, and today I'll be reviewing the document API Recommended Practice 754. The document's titled Process Safety Performance Indicators for the Refining and Petrochemical Industries. I'll give an overview of the document, and following my discussion, my colleague Lex Carlson We'll discuss data capture and data submission as it relates to the recommended practice, and there'll be plenty of time at the end for questions. I should note that during this presentation, I'll use the term RP frequently as an abbreviation for the recommended practice. And then these are the areas that I'll be covering during today's discussion. I'll begin with some background information about how the recommended practice came to exist. This is a photo taken by the Chemical Safety Board of the aftermath of a terrible explosion. This incident led to the creation of RP 754. It was the March 2005 BP Texas City refinery explosion. You've probably heard of it. This explosion killed 15, injured 180, and did significant damage to the refinery. Many agencies, including the Chemical Safety Board, were dispatched to investigate this incident and develop recommendations to prevent similar incidents in the industry. After conducting an investigation, the CSB made recommendations to the industry. One of those recommendations called for API and the United Steelworkers to work together to develop a standard that creates performance indicators for process safety in refineries and petrochemical facilities. It was believed that a performance indicators program would provide useful information for driving improvements that, when acted upon, would contribute to reducing risks of major incidents in our industry. This wasn't the only RP that resulted from the CSB investigation. Other standards that were created by API as a result were related to portable buildings, RP 753, and an industry standard for fatigue management, RP 755. The first edition of RP 754 was originally published in 2010. Before that, there was not a widely used standardized way to measure process safety performance, or to even know if our industry was getting better or worse. Before the RP, only a few companies had specific process safety indicators, but they were varied and not useful for benchmarking across an industry. Some companies were even using their occupational safety metrics to also represent their process safety performance, which we know today is not representative of process safety performance. Fast forward to today, about 93% of US refiners recognize and participate in the RP 754 data collection, reporting, and analysis. Of all the process safety improvement initiatives, I personally believe that this RP has led to the most improvement in our industry, because it has allowed us to have a common definition of process safety events that is meaningful and can be consistently applied across our industry. It allows us to compare our performance against our own plants and across other companies and the entire industry. It allows us to know if we're getting better, and it provides data for analysis can be used to drive improvement initiatives, both local to a specific facility or broadly across an entire industry. I think RP 754 is a big contributor to the significant improvements we've seen in process safety over the last 14 years. The RP was developed with a few guiding principles in mind. The intent was to leverage work that was already available by other organizations and trade groups, such as the Center for Chemical Process Safety, the United Kingdom Health and Safety Executive, and others, and of course to satisfy the CSB recommendation. The guiding principles included that the indicators should promote learning and drive improvement in process safety. They should be simple and easy to understand. The indicators should be statistically valid, meaning that they will achieve consistent reporting through consistent definitions, provide a data set large enough to allow statistical analysis, and use a normalization factor to allow benchmarking between very small and very large facilities. And they should be at a high enough level to allow benchmarking across multiple companies, regardless of their location, a company's culture, or other factors that might influence lower level metrics. The scope of the RP was developed for refining and petrochemical industries, but it was also intended to be applicable to other industries with operating systems and processes where a loss of containment has the potential to cause harm. A common question about RP 754 is whether the applicability is limited to those facilities covered by the OSHA PSM standard, standard 1910 0.119 or other national or international regulations? And the answer is it is not. It is meant to be broadly inclusive of all industries where a process leak could cause an incident. At the same time that it's to be broadly inclusive, the RP includes a number of exclusions from the scope to allow the indicators to focus on process safety versus all of the other types of potential incidents like occupational or transportation incidents, routine emissions, office or shop type injuries, losses of containment from ancillary equipment which are not connected to a process, or new construction that has never been part of a process. So I want to talk about leading and lagging indicators. This figure is referred to as Heinrich's triangle. The concept with the triangle is that many precursor incidents with lesser consequences occur at the base of the triangle for every one of the higher incidents that occur with the higher consequence, the peak of the pyramid. It is believed that there's a predictive relationship between these lower and higher consequence events. Hence, the lower level events are leading indicators. For the high level events, the lagging indicators. These leading indicators can be used to identify weaknesses in systems that can be corrected before the associated higher level incidents occur. This recommended practice identifies leading and lagging safety indicators that are useful for driving performance improvement. The indicators are divided into 4 tiers that represent a leading and lagging indicator continuum. Tier 1 is the most lagging indicator, and Tier 4 is the most leading indicator. Also, Tier 1s are those events with the highest actual consequences, while Tier 4 metrics reflect more management system weaknesses or lapses in operating discipline. Per the RP 754, Tiers 1 and Tier 2 require that a loss of containment has occurred. Tier 3s and Tier 4 are not defined in the RP, but generally expand to include events or issues not involving a loss of containment. So as a quick summary, Tiers 1 and 2 are defined and standardized in RP 754. They're suitable for nationwide public reporting and benchmarking and driving industry initiatives. Tier 3 and Tier 4s are company defined. They're intended for internal use by your companies at individual sites or within a whole company, and they're suitable for driving local or company-wide improvement initiatives. The categorization for Tier 1 and Tier 2 events is determined first by a loss of primary containment, then by the consequences, and finally by the type of material that is released. This table shows a summarized criteria for Tier 1 and Tier 2 events. You'll see that the Tier 2 consequences are a bit less severe than the Tier 1 consequences. The loss of containment is a precursor to reaching a Tier 1 or Tier 2 event. The RP defines a loss of containment as any unplanned or uncontrolled release of materials. The consequence can be injuries, fires, explosions, public protective measures, or simply the amount of material that was released. A loss of containment can be any material. It can include non-toxic and non-flammable materials like water, steam, carbon dioxide, or nitrogen. This also includes losses of containment through pressure relief device activation, whether directly to the atmosphere or via a downstream destructive device. Now, you need more than just this table to be able to classify your events properly. The RP also contains detailed definitions of terms and situations, as well as more than 100 examples that are necessary to help clarify the various aspects of this table. But I do want to walk through the table quickly because it's the heart of classifying incidents. So looking at the table, the first event that has to happen to be a Tier 1 or Tier 2 event is that an unplanned or uncontrolled release has to occur. Then if you have an injury, an OSHA recordable, then that's a Tier 2 event. If it causes a fatality or days away event, then that would be a Tier 1 event. Also, a hospitalization or an officially declared community evacuation or shelter in place would lead to a tier 1 event. When there's a fire or explosion involved with the release of material, if the damage is more than $2,500, then that would be a tier 2 event. If it exceeds $100,000, then that is a tier 1 event. When considering a pressure relief device discharge or an emission from an upset in the plant, generally, well, not generally, a secondary consequence is required. So if you have one of those discharges and one of these other consequences occur, a rain out, a discharge to an unsafe location, an on-site shelter in place, or an on-site evacuation, or public protective measures, then that could result in a tier 1 or a tier 2 event, depending on how large the discharge was. If the discharge was greater than a tier 2 threshold quantity, then it's a tier 2. If it was greater than a tier 1 threshold quantity, then it's categorized as a tier 1. For losses of containment that are not ignited and do not cause an injury, then we compare them to the amount of material that was released in 1 hour, the greatest rate in any 1 hour period. If that exceeds a tier 2 threshold quantity, then it's categorized as a tier 2. If it exceeds a tier 1 threshold quantity, then it's a tier 1. All these quantities are conveniently listed in a table in the RP. It's a large table, so I'm not going to try to show it here, but we can talk about it more later. So talking more about the leading indicators, the tier 3 and tier 4 indicators are leading indicators that are defined by each company. API 754 does not define them, but does require that companies conforming to the RP have developed these metrics. Indicators at this level are too specific for industry-wide definition because they can be impacted by local circumstances that might include the type of facility, the type of processes at the facility, the materials processed, the location, size of the facility, even the age of the facility or the specific culture at the facility could influence these leading metrics. The RP suggests that companies develop their own leading indicators that are credible and useful to them for driving local process safety improvements. The RP suggests that tier 3 indicators are generally considered to be challenges to barrier systems. These are generally events that have progressed along a pathway to harm, but were stopped short of reaching a tier 1 or tier 2 consequence. Learning from these events allows a facility to identify weaknesses and implement improvement from relatively minor incidents without suffering the consequences of a more severe incident. Challenges to barrier systems might include exceeding a safe operating limit, a failed inspection or test, a demand on a safety system, or simply smaller losses of containment that do not reach a tier 1 or tier 2 threshold quantity. The choice of tier 4 indicators should be limited to a meaningful few that are representative to the operating discipline and management systems in place at a particular facility. The indicators should be those with the highest predictive ability and those that provide actionable information to a facility. Excuse me. Sorry, I clicked on the screen. There we go. So sorry, there's a lag. As a leading indicator, the intent, like the tier 3, is to identify weaknesses that have the potential to someday result in a tier 1 or tier 2 event. The RP offers several examples of tier 4 metrics as shown here. You're not expected to stick to this list and you're not expected to implement all of them, but these would include simple management system type categories like closing process safety action items on time, completing inspections on time, completion of training, hazard reviews or PHAs on their respective schedules, completing emergency drills and exercises, or managing major equipment deficiencies. These are just examples, and there may be other management systems at your site that would be better leading indicators, and you're free to use those. The most useful part of the RP is Annex E. This annex includes about 100 example situations that clarify the nuances involved with using the RP. The examples are organized by topic and are useful to get consistent results from the various companies, and they interpret the written words in the RP. Most of these examples have resulted from questions to API about how to use or interpret the recommended practice, questions from people like you. The way it's formatted, an example or situation is given, then next to it in a column, the tiering results are given, whether it's a tier 1, a tier 2, or not tierable, and the rationale for why that determination was made. I've been, excuse me, I've been actively working with API 754 for 14 years. I currently chair the API 754 committee, and I oversaw the last revision of the document, yet I still refer to Annex E very frequently. It's an incredibly useful annex, and it will help you get consistent results among sites and among companies and across your industry. At this point, I'll turn the presentation over to my colleague, Lex Carlson. I will continue to advance the slides. So Lex, let me know when you're ready to go to the next slide. And I'm getting a lag again.
Thank you, Rodney. So following that coverage of the contents of 754, I'm going to talk about how we collect the data and what we do with the data once we have it. So every year, API conducts an annual collection of process safety event data from companies, both members and non-members. We ask them to report process safety events for their US refining and petrochemical sites. Our annual survey covers tier 1 and tier 2 events as defined by RP 754. We do not collect tier 3 and tier 4 metrics. And as Rodney noted, those may be tracked internally at each company. Our survey collects information on every facility that a company has, including the facility type, location, refining capacity, and hours worked. We then also collect information on each process safety event, including the date and time, the process, material, type of equipment, mode of operation, consequences, and then up to 3 causal factors for each event. Our data collection is done by a spreadsheet, and it's actually done in coordination with another trade association called AFPM. Companies only have to complete the exercise once. We do have a box in the spreadsheet that they check, and it allows the data to be shared to both associations. This spreadsheet is available on API's website via the link on the slide here, and it also has other information about API RP 754 on that web page. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm just going to quickly cover the data collection fields that are contained in that spreadsheet so you can get a feel for just how much data we are collecting on these process safety events. On the left-hand side, you'll see all of the fields that we collect for each facility, and then the right-hand column, event characteristics. These are the fields that we collect for both tier 1 and tier 2 events. I do just want to draw your attention to the mode of operation, point of release, and causal factors. For those fields, we do have subcategories. The goal there is to obtain more granular data and expand our analysis of this data. Some of these are contained in 754, and some of these were found through analysis of the data, and a need was identified to improve our collection and level of detail captured. Next slide, please. Thank you. So these are the tier 1 consequences that Rodney outlined on the previous slide, on one of the previous slides. So we collect all of these fields, the consequences for injuries, fatalities, hospitalizations, etc., for every tier 1 event. And on this slide here, I want to draw your attention to the tier 1 severity weight. So this was made mandatory for reporting in the 3rd edition of 754, and you'll see there are 5 subcategories there. These are contained in Annex D of 754. The goal here is to assess whether tier 1 events are becoming more or less severe over time, as well as looking at those subcategories, potentially seeing what consequence type is driving the more severe events. Next slide, please. And again, Rodney showed this on a previous slide, but these are the tier 2 consequences that we collect, very similar to tier 1, with the except the fact that the thresholds for fires and releases and emissions are lower, and the injury consequences are also of a lower severity here. Next slide, please. Thank you. So before we publish any reports, the data actually undergoes 2 rounds of review, first by myself and my counterpart at AFPM, and then it undergoes a blinded review by subject matter experts. And throughout that process, we are following up with the companies, asking questions about the data, getting more information to either validate their the inputs that they've provided or change their responses to more align with 754 definitions. So once the data has been finalized, API provides 2 reports to our respondents. The first is the annual API PSE report. This report contains aggregate data for all of the fields that you saw on the previous slides. It contains the current survey year as well as 4 previous years, and then additionally a 5-year average. So you can see 5 years worth of data as well as the average across those 5 years for all of the fields. We do withhold any company identifiable information. So you'll get the event characteristics, and then it'll be broken down in some areas such as tier 1 rate by different capacity groups for refineries, but you won't actually see what company reported which data. The next report that companies receive is a company-specific benchmark report. So this allows you to look at your company's data versus the industry as reported to API. And as Rodney mentioned, and you'll see on the table at the bottom there, our coverage is over 90% in our survey in terms of refining capacity every year that we do this. So it's a solid representation of the US refining industry. So within that benchmark report, the industry data is then also broken down into quartiles, and you are able to see easily where your tier 1 and tier 2 metrics fall within the industry distribution. The last thing we do is we publish a 1-pager on API's website. You'll find it at that link that was shown previously for the spreadsheet. It contains this table, which has the number of companies that participated, the number of refineries, the refinery capacity response rate, the number of tier 1 and tier 2 PSEs, and then the associated rates as well. And you'll see there are, again, the 5 years of data and then the 5-year average. And this 1-pager does have a bit of a write-up and some charts associated, but this table contains the data that it's really centered around. And then just a reminder about the PSE rate calculation. We calculate that by taking the total number of PSEs times 200,000 work hours, and then divided by the number of reported work hours to get the rate. Next slide, please. Thank you. So once we do the benchmarking and publish the annual report, we're not done yet with the data. So that data is then fed into the API AFPM Advancing Process Safety Initiative. And what this is, it's a joint API AFPM work group, which you can see the org chart on the right, and perhaps not one work group, but many work groups that really takes this data and then tries to improve process safety by developing learnings and other resources for the industry. So I mentioned earlier that we have those subcategories for some of our event fields that we capture. Some of those were born out of the review of the industry learning and outreach subgroup. For instance, the mode of operation startup subcategory. This is only our 2nd year collecting that data, but it was a need identified when we were doing our analysis that, we really wanted to have more detail there. Additionally, the review and analysis of the complete data set has led to the formation of some of these subgroups that you see on the side here. So the human reliability, which is now human and operational performance, and mechanical integrity, those 2 groups were founded out of a need to improve process safety in those particular in events involving those particular areas. So like I said, the data is used to develop learnings documents, webinars, and various other resources for the industry on topics of interest, such as winterization, tank overfills, and again, startup mode. So really understanding the 754 contents, driving all the way down to these developments of learnings and webinars to try and drive a data-driven approach to drive process safety and performance. Thank you. And I will turn it over to my colleagues at IOGP to continue on with 456.
Gracias, sí, Lex and Rodney. Vamos a pasar a Margarita, que parece que resolvió el tema de la cámara. Pero no te escuchamos.
Buenos días. Good morning.
Sí.
¿Me escuchan?
Sí.
Okay. Is the presentation in slideshow?
Not yet.
Is good?
Yes, but we can see the moderator view, not the.
Now?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to share with you the IOGP 456 updates, despite all the technology issues today. Yeah, my name is Margarita Malaspina. I work in Woodside Energy, and I'm vice chair of the Process Safety Subcommittee for IOGP. The plan for today, what I would like to do is a couple of background context slide about what is the recommended practice, the key drivers for the update, and then dive into those updates. And wanted to close with the video that shows the latest IOGP Process Safety Event Report for the 2022, and then open for comments or questions, okay? The IOGP Report 456 provides guidance for upstream companies on key performance indicators used in managing process safety events, right? So it's important to highlight that it builds on the framework and definitions included in the API recommended practice 752, which are our peers just explained it. Now, the difference is that it's tailored on their application to upstream oil and gas activities, okay? Just focus on that. Now, the API report 754 was updated in 2021, and that triggers the update of the recommended practice for 56 to keep alignment between those two documents. And with that, the publication of the third edition was in May 2023. Now, to get to that point, a task force was created for more than 15 subject matter experts between the Process Safety Subcommittee as well as the well expert community within IOGP. And in terms of the product, we can proudly say that we maintain alignment with API RP74, and that these updates, and we will see in the future slides, these updates build on the implementation from the members companies and provide input on how the companies have implemented and learned from the indicators, no, from tier, especially for tier 1 and tier 2, but also give insights on the tier 3 and tier 4 indicators. Now, in terms of implementation, for reporting purposes, this third edition will apply from the events from last year, from 2023 onwards, okay? So basically, mid-year, usually when the report is issued, this year will include the updates of these guidelines. Now, if we move on the drivers, so as I mentioned, the key one was the update of 754, right? But there are two other, I would say, powerful inputs. One of them is that there was a leading indicator survey upon the members on the Process Safety Subcommittee. So those results were published on 2021, and we were able to analyze those insights. And also, and last but not least, there was a lot of collaboration and engagement with the well community, and that help to implement, like localize, let's put it this way, localize the indicators in those activities that are more unique. So you will see that there is a better engagement and clarification within the examples and the definitions to better engage the well operations community. Now, I wanted to stop here and highlight that all these updates are part of the continuous improvement process. There was no any fundamental change in this update. It's more capitalizing of what we have been learning, which is at the end of the day, the purpose of Measure, right? Is learning from the events and avoid that this happen again. So you will see that it's mainly clarification on the tier classification. We have almost 40 new examples. So that's quite amazing. Updates on a couple of definitions, few added definitions that add clarity. And as I said before, one of the biggest updates that we're proud of is the greater clarity on the clarification and definition of the process safety events for the well operations, as well as the well control incidents, which there is a specific section in API 456 around that. We were able to analyze also the survey around the leading indicators and gave us a lot of input in the tier 3 and tier 4 that were included in the updates. And additionally, the tier 1 severity weighting and the global harmonization systems, which are required by API RP74, they are referred, they are included in the report for acknowledge these activities. However, they are not mandatory because they are not part of the data management that IOGP provides. Now, let's go through the updates itself. So I will start with the examples. So if you are familiar with the IOGP 456, part F of that section is that lists all the examples, and those examples are classified, subclassified for easy reference. For example, loss of containment, acute events, well operation events. So it helps you to identify them quickly, right? So those examples are, many of them are adopted from API RP74, but also the IOGP members input a lot of their experience and nonsense on those operations. So a lot of input from the members as well. Now, something really cool that we now have within the IOGP data website is that if you go to the data website specifically within the IOGP webpage, there is a section where you can get the examples without going to the report itself. So it's for easy reference. And additionally, I will say that we can have more examples in a timely manner, in a way that if us as members identify key items to share, we can do so. I mean, of course, it has some governance, right? And it has to be approved, but those can be published in that list without waiting for the next publication of the report. So we can have a greater collaboration between the members in a timely manner, right? So that's why need that we have that now in the web page. Now, continue with the examples. So as I mentioned, almost for like 38 to be exact, 38 new examples, and the whole part F was reviewed and updated to clarify, better understand the examples. It's like, for me personally, I see it very valuable in the way that sometimes definitions can, you can see it a way and might appear a different way, but the examples like open your eyes, I mean, it's very valuable to have those explanations. So the new examples are based on many discussions and situations where it could be either tricky or it's not quite clear what's the answer. So that helps, to clarify those concerns. Again, listening to the implementation from our members. So examples are like the two phases release, diesel releases, tube leaks within exchangers, these type of things. There is also a new section concerning to the process safety responsible party that reports the event. Almost 10 examples were added there, and the piece about well operations was deeply upgraded. I mean, all the examples there were updated to expand them on the clarification, and they were also linked with the well control incident classification, as many process safety events can be also well controlled incidents. So it helped you clarify that. There is also the part J on the report that is specifically about well controlled incidents, and that section was deeply upgraded as well. Again, when I say deeply upgraded, is adding clarification, fundamental changes. Now, I wanted to go through the key definitions that were updated. And I wanted to highlight whatever you see in yellow is coming directly from the API RP74. Those definitions of updates are coming straight from API, okay? And they is meant either to add definition or add clarification in the definition. So the first one for the primary containment, so there is a clarification added around the closed systems, that the closed systems are part of the primary containment. This is closed drain, rapid debit inventory systems, this type of thing. So there is a clarification there. On the secondary containment, to be aligned with the primary container, it has the distinction between the open drainage collection, right? So minor updates there. The direct cost definition was, I would say, expanded in a granular base to really explain what is included in the direct cost and what's not included. I mean, it's very extensive, the explanation to better classify the direct cost. Indoor release has been a concept that it's been included in the previous revisions, but there was no definition. So everybody is pretty happy that we have a criteria of what is indoor release, because it could vary. If there is no definition, there is more room for interpretation. And unsafe location, for the unsafe location, there are two key updates. One is that they clarify the alignment or highlight the alignment with the API RP 521, but also clarify that whenever you have administrative controls within a event that is visible, if you either have signs, barricades, these type of things are excluded for this definition of unsafe location in terms of reporting the events. Moving along with the well operations updates, as I mentioned earlier, this effort was in conjunction with the well community within IOGP. Work closely with that team to better localize the guidance to their needs. And one key change to allow that was the removal of the drilling definition. And this was replaced with the well operations definitions to be more inclusive. Okay, so now it's like all the activities that are well operations related. And with that, other definition had to be updated to be aligned, right? Like the production definition, the boundaries of the production definition were slightly updated to be aligned with the well operations, as well as the process definition. Now, the other key change within the well operations part C section is that previously there was the concept of in-hole or not in-hole, and now all of this was replaced with the part C applicability to upstream operations. So, and give you a detailed explanation on what it means, and the examples are pretty robust to help you classify the events properly. So with that, the process definition had to be aligned to include the well activities as well. No? So I think those are the key updates. As mentioned, nothing fundamental and very important, keeping alignment with the API RP 74. Key items that I would like you to take away from this session is that the IOGP report for 56 provide guidance tailored to the upstream companies, is pretty much aligned with the API RP 74. These updates is a continuous improvement, adding clarity on, especially on the examples, and expanding on the well operations implementation to have a better report and better engagement in general with the well community. And all of this is really important, because once you have an aligned process safety reporting with standardized metrics, I mean, this help you with the benchmarking and the learning when you have the same baseline, right? And what is key in all this effort is that IOGP process safety subcommittee and the data committee, collect the data, right? But it does not stop there. Collect the data, analyze the data, and guide industry with learnings to really avoid the recurrence of process safety events and fatalities, right? So it's basically moving from data to action. So, and to give you a proof of that, so I would like to now go through the video that I wanted to share.
Por ahora no vemos el video, Margarita.
ven?
Escuchamos, pero no lo vemos, no.
Now?
No, tampoco. Vemos la presentación, pero sin slideshow. Pero escuchamos bien la música. Ah, ahora sí.
Okay.
Ahora sí.
I will start over then.
No, no está funcionando, desgraciadamente.
Would you like me to try?
Yes, okay, if you want to, yeah.
Okay, I will share my screen. Please confirm if you can hear it. Can you hear?
We can't see. Maybe I will stop Margarita sharing. Yeah, so now I can see your screen.
Please let me know if you can hear
Okay.
the video.
No, we can't.
Okay.
But maybe
Just a minute, let me share again. Just one minute. I know what happened. I have to share sound. Now it will work.
Still without sound. Okay, yeah, maybe yes. Yes.
I will end my presentation here. Back to you, Margarita.
Yeah, so with that, we conclude the presentation and we can open to questions and comments.
Gracias a los tres disertantes. Pueden poner sus cámaras, los tres. Tenemos pocos, se alargaron un poco, bueno, mi presentación y después las presentaciones, pero vamos a arrancar, bueno, recordar a los asistentes que está el icono de preguntas y respuestas y que pueden ahí escribir sus preguntas para cualquiera de los tres disertantes o para los tres disertantes. Y las voy a leer para que sean contestadas. Voy a empezar por una pregunta a los dos disertantes de API. Y la voy a hacer en inglés. Do companies that use API RP754 and submit their PSE, process safety event data, see any improvement in their process safety performance?
Yes, I can take that one. I can give an example of my company. My company has seen improvement since we started using RP754, but across the U.S. refining industry, since RP754 data was first started collecting and being analyzed, and improvement initiatives being made across the industry from that data, the API Tier 1 rate has decreased by 38% over the time period between 2011, the first collection year, and the most recent collection year, 2022. The 2023 data is just now being submitted, so we don't have that yet, but hopefully we'll see even more decrease this year. Lex may have to answer this, but I think that data is available to member companies through the annual PSE report that's put out if any member companies want to take a look at that.
Yes, and then we also publish the rates publicly once the report has been finalized.
Gotcha.
Ok, entonces hay data que están disponibles para no socios también. ¿Es eso, Lex?
Yes, so it's just the high level rates of the number of companies, refineries, and then the Tier 1 and Tier 2 rate are available to members and non-members. And anyone who wants to view the data, it's on API's website. But only those who have US refining assets and participate in our survey are able to see that full aggregate report and benchmarking reports.
Ok. Lo otro, porque es lo que dije al principio, ¿no? El objetivo de este webinar también, de proponer este webinar, es de fomentar la participación de todas las empresas socias de ARPEL, operadoras, porque yo digo, soy el equivalente del ex en ARPEL, estoy a cargo de recibir los datos y de revisarlos. Vemos una diferencia todavía entre la cantidad de compañías que aportan en seguridad industrial y la cantidad de empresas que aportan en seguridad de proceso. Entonces creo que es como importante lo que, bueno, contestó Rodney antes, que supongo, bueno, le puedo hacer la misma pregunta a Margarita, ¿no? Que el benchmarking y reportar los incidentes es como un primer paso para mejorar los resultados, bajar los accidentes y bajar las fatalidades. Supongo que en IOGP también tienen ven en las compañías esos mismos resultados y por eso siguen participando.
Sí, additionally, in the IOGP, we try to move from data to action, as I mentioned before, and we have a couple of initiatives. Like 5 years ago, we started to look at the trends in the last 10 years. We had a big project, a Safira project, to really analyze and come up with efforts to help the community to reduce the events as possible. And so there are 3 key areas, right, that we have seen. The main one which we tackled first was on the front line. So we created the process safety fundamentals based on the data that we had analyzed, and guidance for the frontline workers on what process safety means for them, and how they can help to avoid events and have a better performance in general. And there are 2 other pillars that we are working. One is the process safety in design, because at the end of the day, if you don't go to the root, right, to the root cause of the issues, it's hard to avoid recurrence. So it's a little bit of behavior, but also have better facilities and also maintain those facilities. So we have the process safety fundamentals for front lines. We're working on an initiative right now on design, and after that we are moving also for the mechanical integrity piece. So yeah, hope that answered your question.
You are on mute.
Puede pasar, gracias. Otra pregunta que se puede hacer tanto a IOGP que a API, y que a veces puede desalentar a las compañías de aportar, es tener una idea del tiempo que se requiere para, bueno, para colectar, para preparar y para reportar los eventos de seguridad de procesos. Bueno, por un lado a API, por otro lado a IOGP, y bueno, como el manual de ARPEL está basado, bueno, principalmente en el de API, sería también válido para el de ARPEL, ¿no? No sé si quién quiere empezar, Rodney o Lex.
I can answer for API. Part of my role is to report the data for my company. I have 13 refineries and 2 renewable fuels facilities that we report. So I organize that every year. And the answer on how much time it takes to report really depends on the size of your company and how many process safety incidents you have. A small company that has 0 process safety events, that's 0 tier 1 or tier 2 events, you would spend almost no time doing your submission. You still have to submit data on your facility and the size and where it's located and who your company is, but that would take literally maybe 10 minutes. Now a large company like mine, I'll spend more time on that. And the way I do it is I wait until the incident investigation is complete and the incident details and the causes are known. And then in my organization, I have someone that pulls that submission data out of the incident investigation report and populates it into the submission spreadsheet. And we also have a QA/QC process that we go through to where a second person reviews it and makes sure it's accurate. And finally, we have a legal review before we submit the data. So for us, we collect it and submit it centrally. We don't have all 15 sites doing it. But I would say a good estimate, if the investigation is well written and clear, is probably about 15 minutes per process safety event, 15 minutes per tier 1 and tier 2. As you might expect, sometimes the investigations are not as nice as I would like, and there's sometimes confusing or missing data, and then that can take 30 minutes to an hour per process safety event to work through that process. I hope that I've given you a vague answer, but that's what it is. But what I will say is that as a member of API that submits this data, we like IOGP was saying, you get access to so many improvement tools and information that the initiative has put together over the years, that it's well worth the effort to do that and get the benchmarking data and get access to the improvement initiatives. Anyone else?
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I can add.
Margaret.
Yeah, so I agree with Rodney, and I will say additionally, nowadays in IOGP, before you have to wait until the end of the year to do the submission. Now you can do it through the year, and it's easier once you pass your incident investigation, you have your QC and legal, all of that. You can submit the report. If it happens in February, let's say, you don't have to wait to December, and that even helps the IOGP members because we can collect the data and analyze the data, right? So yeah, it's worth the effort, and I will encourage the members that currently doing, because this is a cycle. This is a continuous improvement process. If we don't submit good data, we cannot analyze. We cannot have good product in the analysis, right? So as clear the data is, the incident investigation, the root causes, we can tackle the action. So that's I guess that's the message for continuous improvement for the members, to encourage to have to submit clear data.
Ok, gracias. Tenemos 10 minutos o 9 y 3 preguntas. Espero que las vamos a poder contestar, y si no, bueno, les serán contestadas después. Entonces, la primera de Hernán Aguila. ¿Se pueden comparar los indicadores obtenidos con IOGP 456 para las instalaciones de upstream con los obtenidos con API RP 754 para operaciones de downstream dentro de una misma compañía?
Sí, de hecho, puedo decirlo en español, ya que si no hay problema. Sí, de hecho, muchos de los operadores mayores lo hacen centralizado, comparan upstream con downstream. Como les dije en la presentación, el reporte de IOGP es basado en API, está completamente alineado y son las mismas bases de los indicadores. Son muchas de las empresas que tienen midstream, downstream, and upstream lo hacen.
So for API, I don't disagree with what Margarita just said, that it's a good comparison, but there are some nuances that you have to be aware of. For instance, a relief device discharge has a much higher likelihood of having a public protective measure at a refinery in a city than it does on an offshore platform. So the same size release would cause a tier 1 at one and not the other, but the release was the same. So I think you just have to be aware of those differences and be willing to tolerate that some of that's going to happen. But it's the best you have, so you should do that.
Bien, gracias. Seguimos con una pregunta bastante específica de John Mora. En la API RP 754, edición 3, se menciona que el reaprovisionamiento de generadores diésel está por fuera del alcance del reporte. Sin embargo, IOGP ahora específicamente los incluye cuando están asociadas a operaciones de pozos. ¿Existiría la intención de que en el corto plazo API RP 754 también los comience a considerar dentro del alcance cuando presten un servicio auxiliar a la operación? La pregunta es más para API, entonces. Si es muy específica y que necesitan averiguar, digo, podemos contestarla después también, ¿no?
So I'll take a stab at it, and I would like to give an official answer by email to make sure that it's a very specific question. I think that there's a couple of differences. If the result is of spilling fuel for the generator, then that would be, considered a non-connected, it's not part of the process. An API, that would be not considered a tierable event. I personally don't see that changing in the RP 754. There are some other ways that a generator could have a fire, a diesel generator, like if there's a process leak that burns it up, then we would count the cost of replacing that generator as part of the direct damage from the fire, and that could lead to a tierable event. I am happy to research that a little bit more and provide a more detailed answer after this call, after the webinar.
Ok, te mandaré la pregunta tal cual por email, si te parece, así la tenés bien. Bueno, y nos quedan 5 minutos y una pregunta más. Entiendo que IOGP no considera para el cálculo de la frecuencia de Process Safety Events las horas hombres trabajadas en construcciones, proyectos. Sin embargo, ocurre en las operaciones de upstream que trabajos ejecutados por construcciones en facilities en servicio provocan incidentes de seguridad de procesos. ¿Cómo deberíamos reportar estas situaciones? Pregunta de Rubén Morgani.
Sí, la diferencia es cuando se está trabajando en operaciones simultáneas. So, la manera que IOGP tiene en el reporte es viéndolo como que estás en la fase de construcción y no hay hidrocarburo que fugar o sustancia que fugar, estás en construcción. De esa manera es que hay que tomarla. Si tú estás en operaciones y tienes un MOC, un Management of Change, y estás operando y también estás construyendo allí, ahí es diferente. Ahí sí lo deberías incluir porque es parte de las horas que tienen que ver con el incidente. Pero el baseline del criterio es como decir, en isolation, como que estás en la fase de construcción y no hay sustancias tóxicas o flammables que puedan causar un process safety event.
No sé si mi duda de la pregunta es si, por ejemplo, viste como un daño por tercero, es decir, que, por ejemplo, algo de la construcción pegue a un caño que está funcionando y que genere, no sé, una fuga.
Sí, pero a daños por tercero es algo que no está dentro del control de la operación, ¿verdad? Entonces, ¿cómo incluyes esas horas? Tienen que ser horas directas que tienen que ver con las operaciones.
Ok, bueno, espero que respondimos bien a la pregunta. Cualquier cosa, me pueden contactar a mí y después paso las preguntas a Alex, a Rodney o a Margarita. También entendí que están a disposición por si hay dudas en la forma de reportar. Por supuesto que yo dentro de Arpel también estoy a disposición para ayudar a las empresas socias a sumarse a la campaña de benchmarking. Si no recibieron los formularios, me pueden contactar y los invito a hacerlo, perdón. En unos días van a recibir por email las dos presentaciones y el enlace a la grabación de este webinar. Y para concluir, bueno, agradecer a los tres disertantes y a Felipe también. Em, y bueno, sí, muchísimas gracias. Fue un gusto tenerlos con nosotros. Gracias. Chao, chao a
Gracias, un
todos.
placer.
Gracias.